Happy Sabbath, church. What a high day it is. I'm sure Jesus is smiling. Today I want to talk a little bit, not very long, a little bit, about something. So this year in Pathfinders, it's all been about treasured. So you might remember we spoke treasured at the start. Treasured, we are treasured by God. You might know the Matthew, is it Matthew? In Matthew, it talks about treasure in the field. It's all about treasured, and you'll see that from our very first camporee at the start of the year, which was called Treasured. And oh, I have the power. There you go. I have the power. So you can see treasured there. And I want to talk specifically today about what I thought was a treasure when I was a kid. When I was a Pathfinder, which is the 7 wonders of the ancient world. You ever heard of them? Oh, I used to dream about the 7 wonders, these 7 big things that people built that were considered so rare, so much of a treasure that people spoke about it for 3,000 years. And I only want to talk about 2 today, but here you can see the 7. And so down in the bottom, I'm going to go left-hand side, we have Egypt, Genesis, Exodus, Egypt. On the right-hand side, we have the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is Persia, Babylon, all those parts of the books of the Bible. And then up to the top left, we have the Greeks and the Romans. We have the statue of Zeus, we have the Artemis's temple, we have the mausoleum. And so you look at these empires, and these are the empires that spanned 3,000 years. And when you look at them on a map like that, you realize just how brilliant God is. When he told Abram, leave your home and go to the land that I promised, because right slap bang in the middle of all those 7 wonders is Israel. Long before they came, God told them, go there, because they would be a light for the rest of the next 3,000 years. Every civilization would cross paths with his people. Now, I don't want to talk about all 7. I really only want to talk about 2. And it starts with this one. Adventurers, this is a battle. Pathfinder's a battle. And on the left-hand side, you can see Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great. And on the right-hand side, you see the Persians. And this is their final battle. And you can see Alexander, his eyes on Darius, the guy on the chariot, with his spear, about to run him through, about to win. The Greeks are about to smash the Persians. Now, this was a painting by a Greek to beat his chest and say, look how strong we are. But for us, it's much more important, because this picture right here of Greeks defeating Persia is prophecy come true. Know that? So that's a picture that was painted by the Greeks, which shows what we know in Daniel 2 of the chest of silver, the Persian king, poor old Darius, being run out, and the Greek Empire coming through by Alexander the Great. So even though they didn't know about it, that is proof that prophecy becomes true. Now, Alexander was a big general and lots of things like that, pathfinders, adventurers. He was a big general. But what he was even more of was a builder. So he built 17 cities, and he called each one of them Alexandria after himself. How about that? How confusing would that be? 17 cities called Alexandria. Now, people didn't like that, but no one was going to argue with Alexander the Great, of course. Now, of all the Alexandrias, there was one that was known across the globe, and it was the Alexandria in Egypt. And Alexandria in Egypt was a port city. You can see it here, a port city. And he built it so that ships could come in from Greece, from Babylon, from Persia. He built this city, and he said, okay, I'm going to make this the trade capital of the world. The problem is, their ships weren't quite as good as ours. And so when people were out in boats, what did they use to know where to go? They'd look up at the what? Stars and sun. And if it was overcast, and it was a big stormy night, and you're in a boat and there's no stars, how did you know which way to go? Sorry? A lighthouse Well, there wasn't any things called lighthouses back then. What they used to do was light a big fire on top of the tallest cliff. And so when they saw this big fire on top of the tallest cliff, they go, okay, that's home. I know where to go. The problem with Alexandria is, do you see many cliffs there? Nope. So they thought, well, we don't have any cliffs. What are we going to do? Well, if we can't take the fire to a cliff, let's bring the cliff to the fire. And so they built the very first lighthouse called the Pharos. See if I can do this. Pharos. And it stood 160 metres tall. To give you an idea, that's taller than most of the buildings in Brisbane. This was the very first lighthouse, and it was the biggest building for about the next 2,000 years. And you could look and see the Pharos's light if you were in the ocean from 50 kilometres away. And so the port city became well known that when you saw the Pharos's light and you're in the middle of the ocean, you go, that's where Alexandria is, that's where home is, that's where I'm going. And so it saved countless lives, because people knew where home was, because they could see this 160 metre tower, they saw the fire, they saw the light, they went, home, that's where I'm going. Now, Alexander may have he may have built Alexandria, but he never lived there. Because once he entered one city, he never left. Do you know which city that was? Babylon. Once Alexander the Great conquered Babylon, he shifted everything to Babylon. Once he entered the gates, there were so many diversions, cool things, fun things to do, lots of things to see, that he decided, I'm never leaving this place again. This is going to be my new capital. He married a Persian bride and spent the rest of his life there and died in Babylon. So he never came out of Babylon again. So for homework, older Pathfinders, if ever you want to read Revelation 18, think about Alexander the Great, who was the strongest and biggest man in the city. The allure of Babylon was so strong that he never left again. And so I want you to think about it. Homework for you. Go home and read Revelation 18, which is something that's important to us, and think about what that means and why they talk about Babylon. Now, the Hanging Gardens, that was one of the things that was in Babylon. So, we talk about this Hanging Gardens in Babylon. One of the things that Alexander just couldn't believe. And there's a lot of conjecture about what they were. No one's ever found them, but the best theory is that if you know Greece, it's pretty... Anyone ever been to Greece? It's like rocky, it's hard, people eat cheese, milk, beef, goats, olives, but that's about it. Good for powering a mighty army, but it's not really that enjoyable. When they came to Babylon, they found fruits that they'd never seen. Luscious fruits. They found grapes, they found pomegranates, they found plums. And so another word for garden in Greek is actually paradise. It's like the Hanging Gardens of Paradise. To the Greeks, this was paradise. But really what it was there was a Persian bride of King Cyrus who lived up in the mountains, and she was homesick, really homesick. And so they said, okay, I'm going to build you a copy of the mountains. And that's what they did. So the king said, I'm going to make a home here in Babylon that looks like your home back in the mountains. And so that's what he did. And this is what they talk about when the scholars talk about what does the Hanging Gardens actually sound like. I want you to listen to this. It is filled with all sorts of trees and looks exactly like a mountain country. The several parts of it rise one on another and resemble a theatre. It is thickly planted, and the trees' broad leaves nearly touch each other and make delightful shade. Water gushes forth from high fountains and sinks down to the ground and are forced up again in twists and spirals, rushing and swirling. Bountiful moisture bathes the tree roots, and the soil is perpetually wet. Succulent fruits hang from the tree, so that you only need to reach out and eat. Does that sound pretty good? Does that sound like paradise? Yeah? Does sound pretty good, doesn't it? And I think there's a reason that it sounds pretty good, which is, this is my opinion, so I believe that when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, there was something put in us that makes us there. If you think about it, Pathfinder's Adventurers, if you look inside, this is not our home. We left our home. This is not our home. And if you look inside, this is where we keep all our stuff. That's really all this is. This is not our home right here. We're just passers-by through this. And so I want you to think about this, Pathfinders, Adventurers. Look at your two things. Firstly is, and older Pathfinders, we're all old Pathfinders. This is not our home. And there will be days on this place that is not our home that are dark and stormy. Might be tomorrow, might be next week, might be 2 years from now, but there will be days in your lives that are dark and stormy. Particularly because this is not our home and it's full of sin. I want you to look at your badges when that comes and ask yourself this question, okay? Who is my Pharos? What was the Pharos? Who is my Pharos? Who is my lighthouse? Because particularly when it is dark and stormy, that is an incredibly important question. And God says, and Jesus says, if you look hard enough through those dark times that are in your life, you will see a light. Might be very glim, but I am there. I am your lighthouse. Like we sang, I am your lighthouse. And if you follow that lighthouse, if you follow that light, I will lead you, what does it say? Safely to the shore. And I will take you home, to your true garden of paradise.